Welcome top news today.
Rachel Laser has been named Executive Director of Americans United for the Separation of Church and State. Laser, a longtime D.C. advocate, is the first female and non-Christian in the group's 71-year history. Kate Perelman, one of the country's most prominent advocacy groups pushing to protect the boundaries between religion and government, is getting its first new leader in a quarter-century. Rachel Laser, a lawyer and longtime advocate on issues related to reproductive freedom, LGBT equality and racism, is the new executive director of Americans United for Separation of Church and State. She is the first woman and, as a Jew, the first non-Christian to lead the 71-year-old group. Laser, 48, takes over the organization at a time when Americans are especially bitter and fragmented about religion's role in public life. From President Trump's travel ban on people from multiple Muslim-majority countries to a pending Supreme Court case over whether American businesses can legally refuse to serve same-sex couples on religious grounds, religion is colliding in new ways with other issues and rights. In an increasingly diverse America, there is little agreement on what is meant by religion, and when the state is becoming too involved, not enough. Should the government protect healthcare workers who don't want to be involved in contraception or abortion on religious grounds, or the woman who seeks them, or both? Should the government direct public funding to public and religious schools equally? Should the government take special care to honor Christian holidays because most Americans are Christian? What those who picked Laser agree upon: they want a fighter and think they've found one. In my lifetime, I don't think I've experienced such an overall assault on the freedom of religion and conscience as I have since the election of Donald Trump, said the Rev. Neil Jones, a Unitarian Universalist pastor who leads Americans United's board. It seems the ploy by the religious right these days is to use freedom of religion, in quotes, as an excuse to violate people's civil rights. We were looking for a leader who is up to the fight, understands the issues and has a real fire in the belly to carry on the banner of separation. While Americans have never been in harmony about the place of religion in public life, the basic concept of the separation of church and state, and what that constituted, was a more bipartisan, uncontroversial idea until recent decades. The country was less diverse and Americans had yet to push hard for the rights of the non-religious and religious minorities. Diversity even within Christianity was less pronounced. Separation, to many, meant protecting the church from state intrusion. Even as America is becoming by some measures less religious, and certainly less religious in an orthodox conservative sense, there isn't yet a solid middle ground on how to juggle so many competing forces. Data show the lack of consensus. The Pew Research Center found in January 2016 that 27% of Americans said political leaders were talking too much about religion, while 40% said they were talking too little. At the same point in the 2012 presidential race, Americans leaned in the other direction. 38% said there was too much religious talk while 30% said too little. But polling by the firm PRI suggests Americans oppose protecting religious rights when it means discriminating. The margin varies based on the issue. Asked in 2017 if small businesses should be allowed to refuse serving gay or lesbian people if it violates the religious beliefs, just 32% were in favor, 13% strongly and 19% simply favor, while 63% were opposed, 34% strongly, according to PRI. Most Americans said faith-based adoption agencies should be barred from refusing to place children with same-gender couples, though the gap was much wider if the agency received federal funding. 68% said agencies should not be able to refuse if the agency gets government funds, 51% if the agencies get no public money. Laser, pronounced laser, rhymes with jazz, also has experience building bridges. For 5 years the University of Chicago Law School graduate worked for Third Way, a progressive think tank aimed at finding common ground with evangelical Christians, in particular on issues like reproductive health, gay equality and torture. She worked with Trump advisor Sam Rodriguez and Florida megachurch pastor Joel Hunter, who pastored President Obama on the measure that supported both contraception access and sexual health education, sometimes seen as more liberal causes, as well as help for pregnant mothers and new parents, sometimes seen as causes of abortion opponents. The measure was never voted on, Laser said, and divisions over the Affordable Care Act blew up the moment of common ground, but the relationships endure, she says. In fact, Laser says a key challenge of this moment is to capture the energy and anger many Americans have felt since Trump's election while simultaneously reintroducing church-state separation as a non-partisan one. We need to awaken that awareness. We need to awaken the notion that religious liberty undergirds the separation of church and state. The two can not only coexist but are tied at the waist, she said in an interview at her New L Street downtown office, which was occupied for 25 years until late last year by the Rev. Barry Lynn, a long-time fixture on cable news on the topic of religion in public life. The church-state separation movement badly needs a branding overhaul, says Jacques Berliner-Blau, a professor at Georgetown University who has written several books on secularism and religion in politics. Berliner-Blau says the movement has often been too male, too atheist and too fringe, focused on things unpopular with most Americans like ending the tax exemptions for houses of worship. Many of the exploding church-state issues people are worried about today have women at the center, he said, like contraception, abortion and women's rights in the workplace. However, he said, secular advocacy groups haven't been nearly as effective as religious conservative ones in recent years. This should be a great time for secular activism, he said, but when it comes to the issue of church-state separation, where is the mobilized coherent social action? It hasn't been there. Laser grew up in Chicago as the daughter of activist parents. She quickly went into public work, especially around reproductive freedom. She and her husband, intellectual property attorney Mark Davies, have 3 children. She worked for the National Women's Law Center, heading what was called the Pharmacy Refusal Project, pushing back against the idea that pharmacists could refuse to fill certain prescriptions on religious grounds. She worked for 5 years at Third Way before becoming Deputy Director of Advocacy for Reform Judaism, the largest denomination in U.S. Jewish life. In the last couple years, Laser has worked on curriculum and consulting related to racism and white privilege. She hopes among the groups she can inspire to be more active protecting separation are African Americans. Her goal: rebrand the fight for the separation of religion and government, so we can win big like we did with marriage equality. What would winning big mean on this complex issue? Laser pauses. It means freedom of religion will be about a diverse, vibrant country, and not a monolithic, culturally favored religion in this country. Read more. Can LGBT rights and religious rights coexist? Kim Davis-like case tests the waters. Ruth Bader Ginsburg calls for equal rights amendment to the Constitution.